Her experiences illustrate many times over the resilience of the human spirit and the power of random acts of kindness, each a small defiant stand in the face of evil. Mary was born in 1925 in Warsaw, the capital of Poland, and moved with her family to the city of Łódź. When the Nazis invaded Poland and established the Warsaw Ghetto, Mary and her family, like other Polish Jews, were sent to the ghetto to segregate them from other Poles and prepare them for deportation to the concentration camps. Mary was a short teenager and frequently managed to escape from the ghetto to obtain food for her family and friends, risking a death sentence each time. Once she was caught by a Polish policeman, but the fact she had attended a Catholic school, could pass as Polish Catholic, and did not look stereotypically Jewish, saved her life. One day the Nazis rounded up a large number of Jews, including Mary's family, and sent them to Treblinka, a concentration camp deep in the forest of Poland, where they were all murdered. Only Mary and her sister were spared because they had been separated by chance from the rest of the family in a different part of the ghetto. Later the Nazis came for Mary and her sister, and they were both sent to Majdanek concentration camp, which was located in the suburbs of the Polish city of Lublin. They were then transported from Majdanek to Auschwitz, where Mary was sent to work in the laundry, and was immediately rounded up by an SS officer, demanding she be marched straight to the gas chamber, as she could no longer work. However, the female SS officer in charge of the laundry stood up for her, shouting, "She's my best worker, even with one hand," and refused to let her be taken away, and ensured Mary work out of sight until her wrist healed. Mary's sister became ill with typhus and died. Mary also became ill with typhus and was sent to the infirmary, where a German officer in the camp told Mary he would hide medicines under a tree to help her recover. He kept his word, and Mary did not die of typhus. As the war was ending and the Russians were closing in on Auschwitz, the Germans, who had kept meticulous records of what they had done, tried to cover up their activities by marching the survivors westwards back into Germany in the hope that most would die on the way. Mary was on that death march and had already marched many miles when she felt she could take no more. She approached a German guard and said, "I'm finished. You may as well kill me now because I cannot walk any further." The German guard responded, "No, I'm not going to kill you. You're going to sleep tonight, and tomorrow morning you are going to run in that direction, towards a German town which I know has already been taken by the Americans." "You'll just shoot me," she said. "No, I won't shoot you, and you will have to trust me." Mary risked her life and ran away the next morning. Thankfully, the guard did not shoot her, and she escaped. When she arrived at the German town, she knocked at the first door, which happened to be the home of a local priest. He gave her refuge and arranged for the Americans to take her to a displaced persons camp. Later, she obtained passage to Australia, where she lives to this day with her whole family. But what about Mary? 10 years ago, at the age of 80, Mary went back to Poland with her family, her son, her daughter, and her grandchildren. She took them to Warsaw and then on to Auschwitz, where she was immediately walked through the gates and into her dormitory and found her old bed. She even recognized pictures of an SS officer who had beaten her. They visited the old synagogue in Lublin at the same time as a group of British Jews, including Rabbi Mervis, who is now the chief rabbi of the UK. Her grandson Jake, who turned 13 during the trip, was already prepared for his bar mitzvah on the family's return to Australia, and was granted the opportunity to read from the scrolls and have an impromptu bar mitzvah under the supervision of Rabbi Mervis. Several elderly Polish Jewish men were present. They were visibly moved and explained to Jake that he was the first young man to undergo a bar mitzvah in that synagogue since the Nazis had destroyed the community in the 1940s. Mary married a Holocaust survivor, her husband Harry. He worked in Auschwitz, unloading supplies from the trains and occasionally stealing provisions to bribe guards for rations and food. He was also involved in plotting an inmates' revolt. Harry died in 2005. Yesterday, Mary's nephew, Josh Frydenberg, a prominent Australian politician, joined the official commemoration of the 70th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. He represented his country amongst world leaders and political figures. As well as marking his respects on behalf of his country, Josh also reflected on his family's experience within the camps. What can we learn from Mary's experience? Mary was saved by 3 random acts of kindness. 3 separate people. The SS officer running the laundry in Auschwitz, the medical officer who provided medicines, and the guard on the death march, all helped her to continue living. Each one of these people made a difference and helped her to survive the madness, bigotry, and terror which resulted in the death of millions of Jews and others who the Nazis said had no right to live. Millions of innocent people who were less fortunate died. I think to prevent all those deaths, many more people would have had to unite against tyranny and bigotry at an earlier stage. In many parts of the world today, there are still examples of violence inspired by intolerance. I ask you today to reflect on this quotation. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And I ask you to remember the power of a random act of kindness.